Hey guys, Tyler Ansman here with Tyler Ans Performance. So today we're going to discuss kind of one specific element of the pitching delivery that we've talked about before. We're going to talk about it a little bit more in depth. How does kind of lagging the arm, right? So if we think about at foot strike, what is the position of that flipped up forearm? How does lagging the arm impact throwing velocity? All right, so I think we want to examine this kind of in its constituent parts first. So one, that's controlled by kind of two main movements: retraction, so the shoulder blade kind of towards the spine, and then horizontal abduction, right, the movement of that humerus kind of backwards. And so those two pieces together, right, we know are associated with higher ball velocity, right? There's research on this topic. And so why does that happen? So I think there's a couple elements worth discussing. So one is that by being at a deeper position at foot strike, we have a longer arc of motion that we can apply force to the baseball through. All right, so we think about kind of that like half ellipsis. If we looked at me overhead from flip up to ball release, right, the longer that pathway gets, the more we can impact that time portion of impulse, right? Force multiplied by time. And if we increase the impulse, the throwing velocity is going to go up. The second piece is that by going through this stretch relatively rapidly and through a relatively large range of motion, the muscle spindles are going to be activated and they're going to kind of turn on this kind of stretch shortening cycle element where we slingshot. We have this reflexive movement happening where that kind of muscle action is happening more powerfully than it could if we did it voluntarily. All right, and so that's kind of the final piece of this, is that reflexive movement is more powerful than that voluntary movement. All right, and so I think kind of going on from there, does this mean that everybody should be through this gigantic range of motion, lagging this arm as far as they can behind their body? No. All right, so there's kind of this Goldilocks portion for everybody. How far do we need to go to take slack out of the system so we can create this stretch and this powerful rebound? And that's going to be different for everybody. So we kind of broadly classify guys into two categories, right? We have the loose movers, so think like your Jacob deGroms and that kind of thing, where we're going to have to go really far to take that slack out. We're going to get a stretch way back there, and then we're going to pull through really rapidly. Or your tighter movers, right? Noah Syndergaard. We're not going to have to go as far. We're going to take slack out of there, and we're going to get slingshotted through. And so if either of these guys, right, did not have their optimal movement strategy, we would see much lower velocities, right? If Noah Syndergaard tried to go way too far, or if Jacob deGrom didn't go far enough, we wouldn't get this kind of optimal output. And so this is kind of the result of length tension relationships and some other kind of anatomical factors that are going to differ between guys. But long story short, we don't want to just kind of crank into that end range position and assume we're going to throw hard. That's not how it's going to work. It's not just that you get there, it's how you get there and how you move through that kind of controls that output element of this. The next kind of important piece to recognize with all of this is that this is one piece to the puzzle. All right, getting to a good position and kind of lagging that arm behind the torso is just one element of this. We likely have to do a few things also well in order to kind of maximize our output. Okay, so what do we want to think about as a whole? I think there's three kind of broad body segments that we want to talk about when we talk about kind of our sequencing. All right, and that's pelvic rotation, it's torso rotation, and then it's how the arm works, right? Those three distinct elements we want to sequence properly and we want to time properly. Okay, so there's something called the summation of speed principle, and essentially what this is that in order for the next body segment to be accelerated to its maximal capabilities, we need that previous body segment to be rapidly decelerated. All right, so think about if you were to like jump out of sand, it's moving all over the place, not super stable, that you're not gonna get great output from that. You jump off of concrete, right? We've got way better output. Kind of the same principle here, where we've got this kind of stable element that can accelerate the next element, right? Lead leg block kind of follows this principle as well. So that's kind of one piece of this. The other kind of consideration here is that we can do a lot of things really well, and if the sequencing and timing are off, we're not going to maximize that output, because what the whole system is relying on is that the timing and sequencing are there so that we can build energy through the system, transfer it into the ball, and we have kind of this gigantic output that's greater than the sum of its parts. All right, and so if any part of this is off from a sequencing or timing standpoint, we're not going to optimally transfer this. Okay, so range of motion, all of these things are great, but how do we time this is a really important piece. And so this was kind of all about one of the pieces that a lot of guys struggle with, is we have trouble kind of segmenting that shoulder and arm complex from the torso. It all rotates as a brick, and what does that look like from kind of diminishing output standpoint when we do that, rather than if we optimally kind of time and sequence this. All right, so this isn't gonna get into kind of how we make this better. We've got some videos on that, and we'll kind of dig deeper into this in a future video, but this is just kind of why lagging the arm is important, all right, and what you should know as background from that. If you got questions, feel free to drop them in the comments, shoot us an email. If you're interested in training, same. We'll talk soon.